looking for material to share with some of my students in my class. There's a lot of amazing videos on YouTube. I don't feel the need to make one for everything because many subjects have been covered more than adequately. But for some that I want to put my own spin on things, or I'm specifically teaching my class, or I just noticed that aren't really covered in a way that is how I'd like them to be, I definitely try to make a video for that. And I noticed that there's several videos covering feet, but I think that a particular approach to it I want to include for my classes. So I'm going to do that right now. It's a quick instructional. It's good to always start with a sharpened pencil. How to draw feet. There's a couple approaches, and I'm teaching a cartoon class, so I'm going to include very cartoony approaches here. Most of these methods are constructive, but first I want to address the anatomy of the foot. I'm going to be a little bit general about it, but inside your leg, you've got two bones that come down, and they connect with a series of bones. So there's a cluster here that are very analogous to the cluster of bones at the base of your wrist. And then long bones that come down, and finally the toe bones. There. And having done some anatomy studies, I've done this fairly quick and gestural, and that helps, being able to know what this stuff looks like so that I can do this. Because there are lots of situations where I want to draw a foot, and I don't necessarily draw this, but knowing this pretty much by heart means that it's really easy to then develop it in daily use when I'm drawing, because I'll see this. It's kind of complicated. I don't really see things in my head, but I'll see this in my mind, so to speak, in a figure of speech, and kind of project on the page, and then I just render what the surrounding skin looks like. I know it's figurative silhouette is what this is called. And that allows me to do this. So right off, this is a recommendation for doing your anatomy studies and life classes, because nothing beats having a really solid, intimate knowledge of human anatomy, and you'll want to take special care and attention to the face, hands, and feet, because they're the most complex parts of the human anatomy. Don't ignore the rest, but these take a little more work to nail. So with that in mind, let's move on to constructive methods. Now, constructive methods basically are ways of simplifying the anatomy. For more realistic or representational drawings, you're simplifying the anatomy into gross forms, simple shapes. And then you can also use it for cartooning. One tip, if you're doing realistic feet, that I always like to mention is the soles of the feet silhouette trick. So if I'm drawing a figure and I've got a leg coming down, instead of trying to draw the top of the foot, what I do, I'm going to use a darker pen here. So what I do, this is going to be a down shot, is think about where the foot is on the ground, and I draw the footprint. And then from that I can extrapolate up and connect the foot. Now, again, some of this is facilitated by an intimate knowledge of the anatomy. But in the end, this is often a quick tool. You'll see a lot of comic book characters drawn this way. People have different shape silhouettes. They might stylize them, so you see this a lot. The pointy foot. And then people draw a figure with pointy toes, like that. And so here's our basic constructive method. I'm going to do a 3/4 down shot. The leg comes down. It's basically like a tapering cylinder. And then the ankle. But keep in mind that ankles are on an angle, like that. So there's these triangles represent the feet, and this is the leg, and the ankles are at angles like that. So I'm going to make this a right foot, So I draw kind of an oval shape to mark where my pivot is for my ankle, but slightly off. So if that's the flat of the bottom of the leg, here's the angle for the ankle. Then below that, I draw a shape that's not really a triangle or a box or a ball. Some people will just say put a ball here, but that kind of leaves off the way the heel protrudes out back. And it doesn't really suit the structure that we're going to add in front of it. So it's kind of this avocado shape, for lack of a better word. Just be a little bit flattened at the bottom, rounding the back, and this is a flat face. And then in front of the flat face, let's add a large wedge. It's going to be the same width as here in the front. It's actually also start it a little high. Don't start at the bottom of the heel. Come down, and from the top, like this. I'm going to draw it so it's transparent so we can see through. So you notice how there's an angle on the bottom? That's going to be the arch. Now there's a bit more up front. It tends to be like narrower here and a little thicker there. This is basically kind of like the knuckles of your toes. And then draw the toes, to start for now, toe-shaped ovals for the constructive method. 1 big, 4 small. And that gives us the shape and silhouette and structure of the foot. So from the side, you would see this. Make sense? Now if you were going to skin that or go over it, the silhouette that you ultimately draw, you want to round off some of the shapes. And this is still for essentially a realistic looking foot. Make sense? This is definitely simplified. There's a lot more details you could add. But this is a constructive method. It's generally the goal is to simplify the forms. That can then transpose to a cartoony form. So let's imagine we're doing a rubbery noodle arm type character. Frequently you see sort of a donut shape. It's kind of like the collar of socks or something at the top of the shoe. And then often just this sort of shape. So why do we even need to worry about the constructive form? Not much, too much really. You can probably just play with these silly forms. But if you, in your head, think about it having some structure inside, there's a cartoony foot in there, it helps when you're animating it. So say the person is running. Figuring out how to bend and suggest force and the shoe pushing off the ground, it helps to have a sense of what the structure is inside. So inside that we've got sort of a larger heel shape and the front toe shape, which is sort of a simplification of what we did before, right? We didn't get into articulating the toes because we don't see the toes. Now, you can probably invent a lot of different cartoon feet. There's simple cartoon feet like you see in Ronald Searle that are really just basically pointy triangles. That'll work. I like Jack Davis's feet. He gives everyone big, flat, platter-like clown feet with heels that protrude back that are also kind of flat. So, like, say this is someone's shoe. Like that. That works as well.
Those feet are part of Jack's signature.
There are a million variations. Once you get into breaking away from the sort of realism that you see in this, the all bets are off. You can pretty much do whatever you want, but to really feel like a foot, it needs to have some basic elements. It's pretty straightforward. Once you get the basics down, just think about when you're doing your cartoon character, the physics of it, that it feels like the feet are planted on the ground, which is where sometimes drawing the silhouette first and then adding the uppers really helps, because you have a strong sense of how it's connected to the ground. You start there. So I usually bring the leg, extend the leg all the way down and kind of add the silhouette and then flush it out. But with the more abstract cartoony feet, you can definitely take a lot of liberties. It just still needs to feel like it connects the character to the ground. And then how does it connect the character to the ground? If you have a character who has little hooves for feet, right, and they only barely ever touch like that, you could do that, but the character is always going to feel kind of like they're dancing on their tiptoes. And that's a good idea for us to talk about for a second here. So if you have a character that you draw with hoof feet like I just did, and they just sort of hover on that, depending on how the rest of the character looks, you could be telling us a lot about the sense of gravity they have. And you can make that absurd or just mildly comical.
A figure like this tends to look like it's floating a little bit because it doesn't really have a firm connection to the ground. If you give characters tiny feet, it'll make them feel like they have less gravity. They come off as a little floaty if they're large. The larger they are, the more they appear to defy gravity, the more profound they affect. So the placement of the feet and the size of the feet will impact this a lot.
He doesn't seem so ridiculous on those legs. He's pretty proportionate with what a cartoon version of how big a pig's feet are. But if I did the same thing...
So it's not, you can't have a character that's sort of unmoored from gravity and looks to be defying it, or has strange physics to its appearances. But the more you do that, the more cartoony or fantasy-like the image gets. So you can control how much realism you want to play with and how much you want to telegraph to your readers that anything goes, this is just silly. You can play those off each other and have very realistic stories with very cartoony characters, or vice versa. Or you can tell your readers that this is a silly story because physics doesn't mean anything, and the rabbit's going to get squashed by the anvil over and over and over again. It's okay. No one's really hurt, kids. Aren't I a silly-looking cute cow?
Well, now it's just absurd. It's not just that both animals are up on their hind legs, but my cow is just wacky proportioned, right? They're just silly. It would seem like she'd be constantly falling over, right? That can be funny. That's the fun thing about cartooning, is you're being absurd.
We can kind of feel it when things feel off, right? It's a balloon elephant, but I'm imagining it. Let me put the shadow in.
Sort of daintily prancing across the savannah. No? Does that seem plausible? She feels kind of light, right? You look at that and, she's got to be full of helium or something. That explains maybe the bulge and the light step. So, how well a foot connects with the ground.
Or whether they don't at all, often communicates speed.
Roadrunner! Didn't think I was going there, right? But the idea of not even touching the ground, basically, and the gestural S-curve.
That's fun. Hi, I hope you enjoyed the cartoon instructional. I'm going to be making more of these videos. They're mainly for my students at Sin Studio and also my student patrons on Patreon. Go check out patreon.com/Salgood and consider pledging. And thanks to all my patrons on Patreon over the last couple of years. Your support has been invaluable and much appreciated. Good night, Internet, and keep doodling.